Hello and welcome to the FMCC webinar, Does Your Workspace Support Your Talents and Strengths? How to create workspaces that engage and motivate. Our presenter today will be Karen Mortazovi. I'm Joshua Amos, Component Liaison. I do want to let everyone know they have been muted for audio quality. If at any time during this webinar you do have a question, please feel free and type it into the question box or the chat box, and we'll go over them during the Q&A portion of the webinar. Also, this webinar is being recorded and a copy will be distributed tomorrow, and I believe the FMCC will post it on their website as well. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Graham Constable with the FMCC Council.
Thank you, Joshua. Yes, welcome everybody. This first slide just shows the facility manager's Consultants Council's vision statement and mission statement. We very much work hard to impact the built environment and bring value to our clients. And we are quite a large sub part of the whole IFMA community. If you could move to the next slide, please, Karen. There are various ways that we can help people within the global community. We have Ask the Expert. On the website we can locate speakers. There are various online educational resources, and should you need to find a consultant, those are listed by location and expertise as well. Thank you, Karen. So I'm one of the moderators today along with Joshua. As Joshua mentioned, the title of today's presentation is Does Your Workspace Support Your Talents and Strengths? How to create workspaces that engage and motivate. And we're very fortunate to have Karen to present this webinar today, and I very much look forward to hearing the presentation. Joshua, over to yourself.
Yes, as we go through this webinar, I would just like to let you know there will be a couple of polls. I'll be launching those, so look out for those. I also want to make you aware that if you want a copy of the PowerPoint, and there are some handouts that Karen is going to be referencing during the webinar, if you go to your control panel under the handout section, just click the plus sign to expand it out, and then you can click and download whichever items you would like to download for today. Okay, and again, like I said, this is going to be recorded. Karen, next slide. And as always, we do want to thank our sponsors for the FMCC. You can see them here. Their contributions are appreciated and go to bringing you better products like the FMCC app. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Joshua. So just a brief introduction to Karen. Karen is an executive and business coach and works within organizational change, and one of Karen's specialties is the talents and strengths side of coaching and facilitation. As you can see, Karen's very passionate about helping individuals build their strengths-based lives, and also organizationally. This particular presentation was also co-presented with Rex Miller last year at the Worldwide Workplace Conference in Denver, Colorado. So without any more delay, I'd like to hand over to you, Karen. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Graham and Joshua, and I'm thrilled to be here with you. Good evening or good morning, depending on where you are. What we're going to cover, I hope you'll be interested in our content today. We're going to hope to cover the following learning objectives. So we'd like to understand the connection between employee engagement, organization success, and their workspace. So we want to know the importance of understanding each person's talents and strengths, and a cost-effective way to do this if you're interested. And also the need to link a person's talents and strengths to their workspace, and also to look at what happens if you have a bad match between the two. How can you potentially resolve any conflict? So those are some of the things that we're going to cover this evening. And as Joshua said, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in. There'll be a few polls. I'd love for you to participate. I wish I could hear you, but I understand the need to set the presentation up this way, but please try to participate as much as possible. And so we're going to first talk about employee engagement, and as was mentioned, I presented largely the same material with Rex Miller in Denver at the IFMA conference last year. And so I've left some of Rex's information, his logo, and some of his slides in here. And in honor of Rex, I'd like to open with one story about employee engagement. That is his story, and it's a remarkable story. And he was working with his organization on their employee engagement, talents and strengths, and he was doing a program. And so he arrived at the location, started his program, and there was one employee, and I'll call him Tom, who was not at all engaged in the presentation and the program. And so he was there physically, but he just wasn't participating. So I think it was the first day Rex was asked to go to lunch with a few people, and Tom was one of them. So during the course of the lunch, he asked Tom, like, what do you like about your job? And Tom says, I hate my job and I hate the people I work with. And Rex goes, okay. And so he goes, well, you must have something you love to do outside of work. So what are you passionate about outside of work? And he basically said, I hate my life. And so Rex said, well, Tom, help me understand, if nothing changes, what's your life going to be like, going forward? And Tom just kind of looked away and looked dejected and looked away. And so, time continued, the program continued, and Tom was there, but again, not very engaged. So a few months later, Rex was coming back for part 2 of the program. And guess who greets him at the door? It's Tom. And Tom, he hardly recognized him. This Tom is like lighter and brighter and smiling and totally engaged. And when they were in the program, Tom was participating and smiling. And so during the break, Rex went over to him and went, Tom, help me understand. Well, something's changed. What has changed? And he said, after your first part of your program, I realized that I didn't want my life to continue like this at work, so I went and talked to my supervisor, and he was very supportive of me and helped me move to another job, and now I love my job, and I love the people I work with. And I love that story because it really talks about the power of being engaged in what you're doing. And so I wanted to share that with you and also show you Rex's story because he's an incredible person. Rex Miller, some of you are probably familiar with Rex. Maybe you've seen or heard some of his talks at past IFMA conferences. And Rex has written several books. And the latest one, he's working on another one that he should be finishing any minute, but the one that's published, the latest one published is Change Your Space, Change Your Culture by Rex and Casey and Konchar. And they talk about how engaging workspaces can transform an organization. And Rex likes to talk about the workspace as a proxy for your culture. So if you want to change your culture, if you change your workspace, then it helps. It's something very tangible that people can see and feel and work in, and it helps to shape your culture. So to me, that gives a lot of power for facilities management and the importance of that role. So Rex's company is Go Mindshift, and the maxim for his company is the organization that can adapt their culture the fastest with the least disruption wins. And so we all know that the rate of change is increasing. So change has always been with us, but the rate that things are changing is speeding up. And so to really, for an organization to stay on point and stay in business, they have to be able to adapt quickly and without disruption. So this chart shows the average company lifespan of companies in the S&P 500 index, and it shows from 1960 to current and projected into the future the lifespan of companies. And you see in 1960 the average lifespan of a company was 60 years, and you see now that it's less than 20 and getting shorter. So companies are not staying around as long. So that shows you have to really be able to adapt in order to stick around and have a future. So IBM did a CEO survey, and they asked CEOs, like, what's keeping you up at night? And CEOs said, recreating the same miracle we pulled off last year. That was what kept them up. Like, how do we had a great year last year, we did some great things, but how do we keep doing that? How do we do that again this year and year after year after year? And the viewpoint is to keep pulling off that miracle, you have to have innovation. So you have to be able to innovate, change your approach to the market, change your products and services, and in some cases change your culture. So you have to be able to innovate, and one way to do that is to collaborate, to increase collaboration with people in your organization, with your customers, with your suppliers. And in order to collaborate effectively, you really need a workforce that's engaged. You need a quality culture that leads to engagement. So we're going to talk a lot about employee engagement during this presentation. So why is employee engagement important? So let's say that you're in a boat and you're rowing to the island of innovation. So using Gallup data, and hopefully you're familiar with the Gallup organization, Gallup data for the United States says that 3 people in your boat, so if you have a boat of 10 people, 3 people or 30% will be actively engaged. So these people know the goal, they're working towards the goal, they require little or minimum supervision to achieve their objective. And surprising to me, I saw some recent data about global actively engaged percentage. So how many of the people are actively engaged on a global scale? And the number is actually even less than it is in the United States, which I found surprising. So it's very important to look at this number and see how we can increase it. So if you have, in the US, if you have 3 people or 30% that are actively engaged, then you're going to have like 5 people or 50% that are not engaged. They're okay, they show up, if you supervise them closely, you keep them on track, then they might be productive, but you can't necessarily count on that. So they require a lot of your management time. So the 3 people in the front of the boat, you're not having to spend a lot of time, but you're having to spend time on the people in the middle. But in addition to those people, 80%, you also have 20% that are actively disengaged. So these are the people who are drilling the hole in the boat and letting water come in. These are the people that basically are costing your company money. Your company would make more money if they stayed home. So what's the cost of this level of engagement? So the lost productivity in the US in terms of this level of engagement, and also employee absenteeism and stress and illness, accounts for $1.6 trillion, which is 13% of the US gross domestic product. So as you can see, engagement is not only something that's kind of interesting to look at, but also it affects our profitability. And so back to the people in the boat, we might think of these people who are actively disengaged or not engaged as bad people, and that's not necessarily true. Sometimes they're just in the wrong job, they're the wrong fit, as the Tom story that I mentioned at the beginning. So, what we're going to look at today is what affects engagement, and how can we make sure that we are actively engaged, and also the people around us are actively engaged. So before we do that, let's look at what you as facility management professionals are often looking at. You're often looking at the facility itself, the operations and maintenance, the technology, sort of the tip of the iceberg. These are the things that you're often focused on, or the things that you see. And those are all important things. But we don't want to lose sight of what's below the water, and that's the people. And 82% of the cost in the company are related to people. So it's not just something that's kind of nice to do. It's almost imperative that we look at the people side of the business in addition to the facilities and technology and the operation maintenance side of the business. So what impacts employee engagement? So one of the things is your talents, your strengths, your passion. Secondly, be what you do in your job function, your job content, who you do it with and for, so who you work for, who you work with, your clients, etc. How much you're compensated, so things like salary, benefits, vacation, those can also impact your engagement. And then the last bullet here is the environment in which you do it, the company culture, the job structure, the physical workspace. So during this presentation, we're mainly going to talk about the first bullet and the last bullet, you, and the environment in which you do your job. So let's shift and look at strength psychology a bit. So on the left, you see Donald Clifton. Donald Clifton is known as the father of strength psychology. Now, Don Clifton has since passed, but he, over 50 or 60 years ago, began to wonder about what makes people successful instead of what makes them fail. So he was really interested in that, and he had a small company called SRI, and they started interviewing lots of people that were the best of the best, the cream of the crop. And these were from CEOs to hotel housekeepers, because he was wanting to know what makes people successful. And along the way, Marcus Buckingham, whose picture is on the right, started working with Don and looking at this issue. And Don's company was so successful that he was able to purchase the Gallup organization. And when they did that, Gallup, as you probably know, is known for polling and analytics. They had a lot of computer capability, and they did a lot of number crunching. And after all of this data gathering and analysis, this is what they found. They found that successful people understand their talents and strengths and build their lives upon them. So they know what their talents are, they build them consciously into strengths, and they use them every day. And they further found that successful organizations capitalize on the differences in people. They see what's unique and special about each person in the organization and put them in a role where they can excel. So before we go much further, you've heard me talk about talents and strengths. Let me define these two terms for you, because people will often use them interchangeably, but we use them quite specifically. A talent is a naturally recurring pattern of thought, feeling, or behavior that can be productively applied. So naturally recurring are kind of keywords, as well as productively applied. So this has to do with how your brain is wired and what is the way that you think. And if you take a talent, you add skills and knowledge, and you use it on a daily basis, it can turn into a strength. A strength can be further defined as consistent, near-perfect performance at an activity you love doing. So this is something that you're great at, you love doing it. When you're doing it, time just goes by and you don't even realize time has passed. And we say it has to be an activity you love doing because we're not interested in a weakness that you have perfected. We're interested in something that you really enjoy. So you have to enjoy it for it to be a strength. So we're going to do our first poll. And what we're asking you is, at work, do you spend the majority of each day working in your talents and strengths? So this is totally anonymous. Nobody's going to know if you what you said on this. But if you could answer 1, yes, you spend the majority of each day working in your talents and strengths, or 2, no, you do not spend the majority of each day working in your talents and strengths. And when Joshua gets the answers, he's going to tell us what they are.
Okay, 67% said yes and 33% said no.
Okay, well, let me tell you, those are actually pretty good numbers. They're higher than what is the average. Really, the number of people who say they use their talents and strengths on a daily basis is between 10 and 20%. And it hasn't shifted that much in the last 10 or 15 years, even though we've had sort of the strengths revolution going on. So the fact that we have 66% is really remarkable and really makes me happy. So thank you for that. So let's get back to the Gallup organization and remember all of that research that they did. When they did all that research, they identified 34 prevalent talent themes that people had that were successful. And if you look at that 34 number, this means there's 33 million potential combinations. So what that tells us is that you're all unique and special. And that doesn't even account for differences like gender, what country you live in, what country you're from, what race you are, religion. If you add all those things, you see that people, each person is unique and special, and there's nobody quite like you in the world. The Clifton StrengthsFinder assessment that they developed is a positive language to describe how we think, why we do the things we do, and what's great about us. So they took all this information that they found and they reverse engineered it into an assessment that you can take to identify your top 5 talents out of a potential 34. So why use the Clifton StrengthsFinder? Like, why do you use that, Karen? You're talking about talents and strengths, and so people will often want to know why we use that assessment. And the reason that I like it is because, 1, I find it to be accurate. For the most part, people tell me, yeah, that's dead on, that's me. 2, it's accessible, it's available online, so it's easy to get to. It's inexpensive, so it costs $15 US, so it's not very, it's not cost prohibitive if you're interested in taking it. It's granular. Remember, it gives you, it doesn't just put you in a in a general bucket, it tells you your top 5 talents, which are going to be different than most other people's top 5 talents. It's independent, so I have no qualms about recommending the Clifton StrengthsFinder because I'm not associated with Gallup in any way. If you get excited about it and you decide to take the assessment, I don't get any sort of kickback from it. So I have no problem talking about this assessment tool. And I like it because it's positive. I mean, how often are we hearing what's great about us in this day and age? So those are some reasons that I like to use this particular assessment. Now, I mentioned that when Gallup did their research, they came up with 34 talent themes, and we're not going to have time to go over all 34. We'll go over about 5 of them today, but I just wanted you to see what the names of the 34 talents are. And then in some subsequent work, they took those 34 talents and they put them into 4 categories. Now, the names have been changed from the Gallup 4 categories, but it's basically the same category. The first category is what we call connect. These talents are used to create, develop, and sustain relationships with other people over time. Then we have the reflect talents. These talents involve the way people gather information, they process it, they make decisions. The energized talents are the talents in which we push ourselves towards results. And the mobilized talents are the talents we use to motivate other people to action. So those are the 4 categories. Now look at how each of the 34 talents, you can see them in the middle, they're in each of those categories, and you may notice that they're not evenly distributed. So there's actually 12 talents in the reflect category, 9 in the energize, 7 in the connect, and the category with the fewest talents is the mobilize. So this also shows an example of something called the Core Clarity Key. Now, Core Clarity is a company that the CEO of Core Clarity is named Candace Fitzpatrick, and I met Candace back when she first, really before she formed her company. She had taken a StrengthsFinder assessment, was fascinated by it, and she came up with this Core Clarity Key. And if you look at the horizontal line for a minute and look at everything above the horizontal line, it's external. So it has to do with other people. And everything below it is internal. It has to do with ourselves. Now I want you to focus on the vertical line in the middle. Everything to the left of the vertical line is interaction. So it has to do with interaction, and everything to the right has to do with motivation. So what that means is the connect talents are about interacting with other people. And the reflect talents are about interacting with ourselves, thinking, reflecting, and the world around us. And on the motivation side, the mobilized talents are about motivating others to action, and the energized are about motivating ourselves to action. So I hope that that's clear. And what we're going to share with you now is what we call the Core Clarity Pyramid. And Graham was nice enough to let me use him, or let us use him, as an illustration tonight. So Graham had already taken the StrengthsFinder, so he sent me his 5 talents, and I made a Core Clarity chart for him just like this. And you see it shows, as I mentioned, when you think of StrengthsFinder, it gives you your top 5 out of 34 talents. Now I'm starting to get some feedback, Josh. I'm not sure if any other people are hearing that or not.
Yeah, I'm starting to hear a little bit of feedback.
I don't know, is that distracting, or do we want to just continue?
Let's continue, and if it gets worse, I'll let you know.
Okay, great. So, so these are Graham's top 5 talents, and you get them in the order. So for him, his number 1 talent is strategic. That showed up the strongest for him, and his number 5 is individualization. So I wanted to briefly go over these talents, what they are, and what they mean. So strategic is his number 1. People with strategic are your big picture thinkers, your top-down thinkers. These are the people who see the end goal, and they easily see the paths that are going to get them to that goal, and they discard all the other paths that are not going to get them to their end goal. They can masterfully craft elegant solutions to complex problems. Now, Core Clarity has a database of people who have taken this assessment, and 25% of the people in the database have strategic in their top 5. There's over 40,000 people in this particular database. The next talent is connectedness. There's two aspects of connectedness. One aspect of it is somewhat spiritual, if you will. It's a belief that we're all connected. We're all a part of something bigger. And what one person does affects what other people do. And there's also an aspect of connectedness where people with this talent can see the connections between things that other people may miss. So they may hear two separate facts, and a person with connectedness can see how they're related in a way that other people may not be able to see. So these people are able to build bridges between different ideas, different cultures, and they have kind of a unique way of thinking that unites the past, present, and the future. 18% of the people in the Core Clarity database have connectedness in their top 5. The next talent is learner. People with learner are just fascinated with learning new things. They're really interested in the process of learning. They're not so much just interested in the diploma. They're interested in learning something new every day. And sometimes they go really deep into a subject, or sometimes it's learning a little about a lot of different things. Learners tend to get bored easily, so they need constant mental stimulation. So I have learner as well as Graham, and I find that if I'm not continuing to learn, that I get bored, and sometimes I get sloppy in my work. So it's important for me to keep learning, and 29% of the database have learner in their top 5. So it's pretty common. The next talent is futuristic. Futuristic people are way out there in the future. They can see what the future can be like. They're able to paint that picture in a way that is really compelling, that makes us understand what we can move towards and what can be true for us. So it can really be an incredible experience to have somebody with futuristic painting that future for us. And only 10% of the people in the Core Clarity database have futuristic in their top 5, so that one's not quite as common. And the last talent that Graham has is individualization. This talent is somebody who has this talent can just naturally see what's great and special about different people, and they know how they can excel and how to work with them and talk with them and what kind of position they can be in so that they can really excel. And 14% of the population has individualization in their top 5. So if you look at Graham's talents together, you'll see that the strategic and the futuristic together really make him very future-oriented. So he's constantly looking out in the future and seeing what things can be and seeing the possibilities. But he also has connectedness, so he's able to connect many different things, and he's probably able to connect the past, the present, and the future together. So not only can he see the future, but he can kind of connect from where we are to where we want to go. And as I mentioned, he's very motivated to learn new things, and he's really good at seeing what people are great at. So Graham, does that sound like you?
Yes. Can you hear me, Karen?
I can.
Yes, it does, and it's interesting how even over time that hasn't changed much.
Yeah, and they say that basically these things are hardwired in our brains by the time that we're about 15 or 16, and unless we have a very traumatic or dramatic experience in our life, then they probably won't change significantly. So one of the things that we do next is we take the talent and we map them on to the Core Clarity Key. So remember I explained the Core Clarity Key to you before, and a picture of that is in the top right-hand corner. So we've mapped Graham's talents onto the Core Clarity Key. So you see that he has 4 reflect talents or green talents, and you see them on the left. We have something we call his core drill, where we have his 4 reflect talents. And then he has 1 connect talent, being individualization, and that's mapped up there as well. So to the top left, we have what we call his core drill. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. So the particular core drill that he has is called a Bridgeneer, and only 8% of the population have this particular core drill. Now there are a total of 15 different core drills, so there's 15 combinations that are possible. And but the one that Graham has is a Bridgeneer, which interestingly enough, even though it's 8% of the population, I also have that as my core drill. So a little bit about Bridgineers they're masters in designing and creating bridges between information and people. They're all about interaction with the world around them and inside their heads. I mean, they're thinking a lot. I'm totally guilty of that. They're often knowledgeable and approachable and often sought out. They typically exude an aura of calmness and serenity, and I really got that from Graham working with him on getting ready for this presentation. He just comes across so calm and together that he's easy to work with. Now, because Bridgineers, including myself, don't have any talents over on the motivation side, sometimes we get hung up with inertia. It's hard to get us going. So it's important for us to be working in our talents. Or sometimes we need other people to help move us along, and they add depth and cohesiveness to any team. So as I mentioned, there are 15 different core drills, and each one is special. We have these information on each of the different core drills. And later on in the presentation, I'm going to show you how to take the assessment if you want and actually find out what your core drill is if you're interested. Okay, so let's move on to talents and the workspace. So I've kind of been up till now giving you a foundation, giving you some background. So I want to move now to the talents and the workspace. So let's look at those 4 categories that I've previously defined to you, but let's look at them in conjunction with their workspace. So as I mentioned, connect talents, they're the ones about relationships and working with other people. So people with connect talents work well and learn from others. So from a workspace perspective, they need to be able to talk to other people. They need spaces where they can get together and build relationships. They need to be with other people, learning from them, talking to them. So they may not work well in closed offices or home offices because they may feel isolated. Now the reflect talents, remember, these are the heavy thinkers, the heavy processors. So sometimes these people need time and space to think and process. So they may need quiet spaces, or if they can't have quiet spaces, a great option is noise canceling headsets. These people may also struggle if they're not given enough time to think about something, and they may not work well in open floor plans or noisy environments where they can't get some quiet time. Now the energized talents, these are people, remember, these are talents about motivating yourself to action. So these folks are always on the go. They're action oriented. So they need to be able to move about freely and quickly. They need to be located physically close to where they need to be to get things done, wherever that is for them. So they don't work well in restricted, cramped spaces where they're far away from their work. So let me stop here and tell you a little story about a woman. She had one of the energized talents, and the name of it was restorative. And people with restorative get energized by things that are broken. They see something that's broken and they're just energized to fix it. And it may be a physical thing, it may be a process, it may be a broken person. But there's this woman who worked for an architectural firm, and she was motivated by fixing broken things. And it just so happened they had a plotter in their office which broke down a lot. And she was really great at fixing it. Other people were not good at this. And she was great at fixing it, and she didn't mind fixing it. But what she really minded was walking all the way across the office to get to the plotter. So what they did was move her desk next to the plotter, so it was very easy for her to get access to it to be able to fix it. So that's an example of how she needed to be located very close to where she needed to actually work, physically get something done. And the last category of talents, remember the mobilized, they're the highly skilled. They're at motivating other people. So they need people to lead. So they need to be around people. They need to be in front of the room, in front of the, they're the ones that grab the marker and go to the whiteboard and start writing. Or if they're on a virtual conference call, they'll want to get access to the virtual whiteboard so they can draw things. So therefore, they may not work well at a home office. They need to have people to lead. They need to be in front of people. So let's circle back around to Graham. So what I did in preparation for this call is I asked Graham, what is your ideal workspace? And he sent me a very highly thought out, reflective answer. So it was quite in depth, and clearly something that he had thought about. It was very visionary. So I could definitely see the futuristic, the strategic coming together in his response to me. And there were a couple of things that he wrote that I thought directly spoke to some of his talents. For instance, one of the things he talked about was having a unit level workspace allocation, which had to be flexible to ensure key support members are located and are available close to their business teams. So I thought that spoke to connectedness, so the need to connect people together. And also speaking to that talent is something that he wrote, which he acknowledged this could be contentious, but he talked about building access passes that would have the capability to allow members of teams to see on a screen where their colleagues are for easy and quick access. So I guess some people would get a little paranoid about that, but his thought is it can really help with connectedness, keeping the team connected and working well together. And then from the individualization standpoint, there was a line that he wrote that I thought spoke directly to that talent. He mentioned there needs to be an understanding of team members' strengths and skills and roles in order to facilitate easy moving through the storming, norming phases of teamwork. So that definitely speaks to knowing what's great and special and about everybody so we can work better as a team. So those are just some ways that his ideal workspace related back to his talents. So Graham, do you have any additional thoughts or comments about that?
No, no, that's very interesting how you put that into perspective. I built that picture up because of seeing how things don't work very well with my clients that I work with, in addition to my own experience. And if I may, I think that technology has a very important role. And if the technology specialists, the IT people knew what's going on, I think they would be able to support teams better as well.
Yeah, I didn't mention that, but you did have an incredible vision of how IT can tie all of this together, which I thought was very powerful. The last thing that Graham mentioned and his the last sentence was an enforced clean desk policy would be necessary. And so I thought, well, that sounds like discipline. So there's a talent called discipline, and people with the talent of discipline often need to keep very organized and clean spaces. So I asked Graham, well, maybe you have discipline in your top 10. And he said no, that that actually came from a situation when he worked in a company and they lost a job because somebody did not keep their workspace clean. And so the client was not impressed with that and they actually lost a job. And then, but that really kind of scared me because then I thought, oh, I could never work in that workspace if I had to keep a clean desk. And so just so you know that some people don't have the talents that is not easy for some talents. There are certain people with certain talents that would really struggle with a clean desk policy. Not that it isn't important, it wouldn't be a good thing, but it's not going to be easy for everybody. So, okay, so let's move on now and let's all do an exercise together about talents and the workspace. So hopefully you're all still with us and you're all still engaged here. And if you were able to download the attachment, there was one called Talents and Workspace Exercise. But if you didn't download it, it's no problem. You can just do it real time with me here on the screen. The first thing I want you to do is guess your predominant talent category. Now, there are a few people that have all their talents in one category, but most people have talent in multiple categories. So you might be thinking, oh yeah, I'm about relationships, but I'm also about getting things done. So you're probably thinking that you identify with more than one category here. But I'm asking you for the sake of this exercise to pick your predominant talent category. Which one do you identify the most with? Are you more about relationships? Are you more about gathering information, thinking about things, making analysis with the information, making decisions? Are you more about getting things done? Or are you more about leading others? So now we're going to take our next poll and ask you to pick your predominant talent category. So just take us, a few seconds here, think about which talent you identify the most with, and then vote. So vote number 1 if you are more about relationships. Vote number 2 if you're more about gathering, thinking, analyzing, making decisions. Vote number 3, if you're more about getting results for yourself. And vote number 4, if you're more about motivating others to action. And this isn't what your job is. This is you as a person in terms of where you think your talents are the strongest.
We had 50% connect and 50% mobilize.
50% connect and 50% mobilize. Okay. Great. So let's now look at your ideal workspace, your ideal work strategy. So think about how you would work your best. What's your ideal workspace or work strategy? Is it, working from home? Is it working in a quiet environment? Is it working around other people? Whatever it is for you, is it a flexible workspace? Just think about how you would absolutely be at your best. And then in the place where you normally put questions, if you could just put in a few words about your ideal workspace. So Josh, was anybody entering anything about their ideal workspace?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Well, Josh, what's your ideal workspace?
Sure. That would be quiet. It would have like area for privacy, but also rooms that people could connect in.
Okay, great. So next, let's look at what your current workspace is. So you've talked about ideally where you are. So now, what is your current workspace? So what are you working in now? And you don't need to share this, but I just want you to think about that. And then think about, is there a gap? Is there a gap between the ideal workspace and work strategy that you might have and where you're currently working? And if there is a gap, what ideas do you have to close it? And now let's look at that. So what do you do if your talents are at odds with your workspace? So the first thing is to be conscious about what your talents are and your workspace needs. In some cases, people think, well, I can't influence this, so why even think about it? But it's important to be aware of these things so that we can, when we're given the opportunity to make changes, we can make changes that make us as effective as possible. And the next thing is make small changes that you're empowered to make. So there are some things you can probably do, you're probably empowered to do, to change your workspace, your work strategy so that it best fits you, or the way that you do your job even. And for instance, I've heard of people like strategically placing a plant between them and their coworker. So there might be some other things you can do. Buy noise canceling headsets if you need a quieter environment. If you want to make bigger changes, then you probably need to get approval from your manager. And to do this, we suggest using a business case. So use productivity statistics. So the data shows that you can be up to 10 times as productive if you're using your talents and your strengths. So use a positive orientation instead of just going and saying, oh, I need this, I need that. Here's why I need these things. It's going to make me more effective and more productive. And then if you're a manager, consider individuals' talents and desires when organizing their workspace and work strategy. Give people as much choice as possible in order to significantly increase satisfaction levels. So maybe you've probably seen the Leesman study that talks about people have the highest level of satisfaction when they work in a flexible environment and they're given a lot of choice. So they have satisfaction up to 40% higher than people with different workspace arrangements and who are not given as much choice. So potential uses of talent. So we've talked about some of them today. Let's go over all of the uses of talents. It helps to understand ourselves and understand others. so it helps to create awareness. Empathy for other people. We understand people's motivations, which may be different than what we thought they were, and then it helps us to accept ourselves and then to accept other people. It helps us to identify a best fit for a job, our culture, or our workspace and our work strategy. Relationship repair management. When I'm asked to come in and help two people who are not getting along, I try to come in from what's great about each one of you. What are your talents? Do you have any talents that are colliding? And start from there, from a positive perspective. It helps with problem solving because different talents are useful to solve different types of problems. And it also helps with team creating and building. So I mentioned the talent of individualization. So you can use this talent to create diverse and effective teams. So what are some next steps you could take? If you're interested in learning more, you could take the StrengthsFinder assessment and I could make you a free Core Clarity Pyramid and Core Drill if you send me your results. And there's actually, as part of the handouts that were loaded, there's something called the process for taking the StrengthsFinder assessment. It's pretty simple. You go to GallupStrengthsCenter.com and take the assessment, and then you capture your results and email them to me at Karen@higherlevelcoaching.com. Change the subject line to IFMA webinar so I'll know who you are, and I will make your pyramid and core drill at no charge for you. The next step could be to think about what changes you can implement and how, when, and where you work based on understanding how to best put your strengths to work, based on understanding how you can be most effective. And then the last thing is think about one step you can take to move from a one-size-fits-all approach to the workplace to a more individualized strategy. So ideally, we'd have an individualized strategy. We may not be able to move to that right away, but maybe we can take a first step. And what would that step be? So I just have a couple of wrap-up slides, but before I share those with you, what questions do you have?
Okay, one question in here says, they don't have a lot of control over their team's workspace, but how can they help them in that area?
Yeah, and what I really suggest that you do here is talk to people. So just having conversations and opening up the conversation around this area, you're going to find some things that you probably can help your employees with that can make them more effective. This can be in how they do their jobs, what functions of their jobs. This can be in their physical workspace. So just by opening up and having a conversation, I think you'll be surprised about how much a difference you can make just beginning with that.
Great. With the trend towards open office concepts, are there certain personality types that tend to work better in those workplaces versus other personality types?
Yes, absolutely. That would be the case. And people, again, with the connect talents tend to work better. People with the mobilize talents tend to work better in open workspaces. One of the, I also want to direct you to a handout. The third handout that was Joshua loaded for me is called Talents in the Workplace. And I actually have all the 34 talent themes listed, a brief descriptor of the talent, and then a workplace consideration for each of the 34. And then I've sliced and diced it a different way, and I've got a workspace strategy, such as an open floor plan, and then I have just a brief definition so we kind of get on common ground there. And then I have may be best for, and I have which talents and categories it may be best for and which ones it may be worse for. Now remember though, these are generalizations, so they're not true for everybody. So that's why you have to have these conversations, but at least it gets you thinking in these areas and gives you some ideas. So,
I have a question here. It's come through where it says how to balance between employee satisfaction and limited workspace.
So how do you balance between employee satisfaction, yeah, and limited workspace, right? Absolutely. That's a tough one, right? So sometimes there's just only so much space that we have, and we may have things that we could do to make increase people's satisfaction, but we may not have the space to do so. So it is a balance, but it's something worth, and it's not easy. It's complex, but it's something that is worth looking at. It's worth opening up, it's worth looking at, it's worth thinking about. And even if we don't have the perfect answer, the fact that we're at least addressing it is going to add value. And I think when you work with someone, an employee, you need to be honest with them that I can't necessarily do everything that's going to make your world perfect, but hopefully I can do something. And let's talk about all of those things. And then as we create new layouts, and sometimes when we are really at an advantage where we're putting up a new building, then we really need to think about the people who are coming into our workplace and how that they are different, and make sure that our workspace can accommodate different people with different talents. And it's not just everybody has to go into this particular situation with no way out of it, like an open plan that's noisy and expect people to always be productive, because some people are not going to be productive in that environment. So how do you help them be productive? So I think there are a lot of things. There are some things we cannot do, but there are a lot of things that we can do. So don't be worried about opening the door because you're afraid of what you're going to find on the other side. Because I think what you're going to find is you're going to find some things that you are able to do and are helpful and supportive and do help people become more productive. And as I mentioned earlier, I think facilities management professionals are in an ideal space to really help with this, to help with embracing this, this kind of concept, and maybe setting the example to the rest of the organization of how this can work. Any other questions before we wrap up? Okay, something. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, it says some management can be very open to this in a classic organization. It says it would be relegated to an enclosed office, but chose to be in a very transparent cube that can accommodate private conversations. And so that's been very beneficial. And another comment was made, says, I find staff is more open to share spontaneously rather than to be hesitant to walk through a door and approach somebody. So that's interesting things to keep in mind with the open concept.
Yeah. You know, the other thing that's true about doors is when you walk through a door, your mindset kind of resets itself. Do you ever walk through a door and you get into the other room and you're like, why did I come in here? I mean, I'm not the only one this happens to, right? So a door kind of resets you. So if you have an open space, then you're not going to have that resetting. You're going to have that ability to bring up what's on your mind, and it's going to be easier for you to do that. It's easier to collaborate. So there are a lot of great advantages to that. There are some disadvantages. And again, a lot of it is it's going to be different for different people. You know, one of the things that I encourage young people to do, or anybody who's thinking about a career change, is to go talk to people about who does that job that you're interested in, and ask them, what do you like the most about it? What do you hate the most about it? But know what they like the most about it may be something that you don't like about it. So I think the same thing is true here. What you like about a workspace may be something that somebody else hates about a workspace. So that is the challenge, to try to address that and come up with something that works for everybody in your organization. So thank you for sharing those. Those were great. So some things to remember: people working in their talents and in environments that support their talents are more engaged. Engaged employees are more productive, happier, and healthier, which leads to more collaboration, innovation, and organizational success. And talk to people about their talents and workspace strategies. Don't make assumptions. And so even though I've shared a few things with you, it may not be true for some people, so don't make assumptions. Ask people and give them as much choice as possible. So with that, I'll turn this back over to Joshua and Graham to wrap us up.
Karen, what a fantastic presentation. Even having done that StrengthsFinder test, and I've learned quite a lot, and I can already think of a number of clients that should have been listening to this presentation, but once we get the audio recording, I shall be sending the link. So fantastic presentation. Thank you very much, Karen.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
So Karen's presentation forms the first of our series this year in the eastern region of the world in terms of webinars. Our next one is about building information modeling and how that's transforming facility management in Asia and around the world. And I can see some synergies between what Michael's going to be covering in April with what you've already done today, Karen. So I would invite everybody to listen in on the next webinar. So thank you very much, Karen, again.
Okay. You're welcome. Couple slides to wrap up for you.
Joshua mentioned that we have before we had a number of councils. This is a very good list, comprehensive list of the various IFMA councils that exist. And I would invite listeners to get involved with some of those. Joshua, perhaps you'd like to close out for us.
Great. I do want to thank everyone for joining us today. And like Graham said, this is the first in a series geared towards those in the Eastern Hemisphere. Announcements will be going out for registrations in the next couple of days. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. Everyone have a good morning or a good evening, depending where you are, and take care.